She provided medical supplies without proper clearance. That constituted grounds for disciplinary action. Such was the declaration of the facility director after the caregiver discreetly offered a struggling former soldier what the institution had denied him. She made no protest, offered no resistance, simply surrendered her identification card and departed. Yet before the day concluded, the elevator chimed and a decorated military commander stepped into the reception area, requesting her by name. If you believe acts of mercy should never face punishment, leave a comment honoring those who continue to do what's right despite consequences. Rebecca Morgan, 34, had devoted nearly 10 years as a caregiver at Westridge Medical Center. Colleagues recognized her for her gentle tone, unwavering composure, and her custom of addressing every patient with respectful titles, regardless of their background. That particular Tuesday afternoon, an individual hobbled into the emergency department waiting area. He appeared elderly, gaunt, with sun-damaged skin. His identification card revealed the name Thomas Bennett. His military tag indicated U.S. Army service. He suffered from a deep laceration on his leg, showed signs of dehydration, and exhibited indicators of infection. The receptionist assessed him briefly and murmured, "Lacks coverage," which Rebecca overheard. "That doesn't diminish his need for treatment," she responded. The supervising nurse frowned. "We cannot formally admit him. He's not registered in our database." "Then I'll provide care informally," Rebecca stated. She collected medical supplies, dressed the wound, administered antibiotics, and offered a nutrition bar from her personal locker. Thomas winced as she cleansed the injury. "Ma'am, I don't want to create problems for you." Rebecca smiled reassuringly. "You defended our nation. The least we can offer is proper medical attention." His eyes, marked by harsh sunlight and restless evenings, met hers momentarily. "I appreciate your kindness," he whispered, his voice rough with gratitude. "This interaction never happened," she informed the patient, "but you won't leave this facility with that limp." The following morning, she received a summons to the administrative office. "You violated protocol, distributed medication without authorization." Rebecca maintained her composure. "I assisted someone who served our nation. You're suspended pending investigation." No discussion, no opportunity for appeal, just a cold corridor filled with silence. She gathered her belongings and exited. No supportive gestures, no demonstrations. As the entrance closed behind her, Rebecca experienced an emptiness within her chest. A decade of dedication erased by a single declaration. Outside, the intense daylight seemed to ridicule her disorientation. She held her personal items against her chest, her identification badge conspicuously missing. In her vehicle, she finally permitted herself to inhale deeply. "I would make the same choice again," she whispered to the empty car. The veteran's appreciative gaze flashed through her memory, worth every repercussion. Her mobile device vibrated. Communications from associates, most carefully avoiding discussion of the incident. A few courageous ones expressing solidarity. Hollow consolation against mortgage obligations and uncertain prospects. Rebecca drove homeward deliberately, replaying the encounter. The veteran's wound, inflamed and crimson, his stoic expression concealing evident discomfort. The manner in which he'd murmured, "Thank you, ma'am," with such self-respect that it nearly shattered her composure. At home, she arranged her medical textbooks on the kitchen surface. Years of education had instructed her about procedures, protocols, and documentation. Yet nowhere had it advised what action to take when humanity and institutional regulations collided directly. She prepared tea she never consumed and observed shadows extending across her living room.
Tomorrow would arrive regardless of her professional status. The question remained, how would she respond to this new reality? By dusk, information had disseminated. Staff members whispered. Some quietly commended her actions. Others avoided visual contact. On digital platforms, someone shared, "Caregiver suspended for assisting a veteran." "Welcome to today's healthcare system." Responses multiplied rapidly. System over individuals. Appalling. She exemplifies heroism. Period. If accurate, that medical center should experience shame. My sibling returned from overseas combat with trauma and received inadequate support. Gratitude for caregivers like her. Terminate the administrator instead. Had it been a wealthy individual with insurance coverage, they would have provided exceptional service. The medical center maintained its silence. No official statement, no expression of regret. Rebecca sat on her porch attempting to control her emotions. Her phone continuously alerted her to incoming messages, communications from colleagues, veterans, unfamiliar individuals. One message particularly caught her attention. It stated, "He informed me of your actions. You're unfamiliar with me, but I know him. I'm arriving soon." No identification, no contact information, just that brief statement. At the medical center, the administrator defended the decision. "We cannot reward violations of policy. The issue concerns maintaining order." The subsequent morning, everything transformed. 10:14 a.m., the elevator announced an arrival. An individual in complete military attire entered the reception area, distinguished emblems adorning his shoulder. The security officer appeared momentarily paralyzed. "May I assist you?" The man responded, "I'm seeking caregiver Rebecca Morgan." Information spread rapidly. Mobile devices emerged. Staff peered around corners. The administrator hastened downstairs. "Commander, might I inquire about your purpose here?" "I've come to make an official statement," the military officer announced to everyone present. Indeed. By evening, Rebecca's suspension had developed into a controversial issue. Local veterans began contacting the medical center switchboard, occupying telephone lines with straightforward inquiries. "Is it factual that you reject those who have served?" The operators possessed no explanations, merely documented apologies. Rebecca's neighbor, a former educator, delivered a homemade casserole. "My child served in overseas conflict," she stated plainly. "Someone with your compassion once treated him when payment wasn't possible. We've always remembered that kindness." Rebecca's message storage reached capacity. Her online profiles became overwhelmed with notifications. One reporter left multiple messages. 2 employment proposals arrived from independent clinics, both mentioning awareness of recent events. Meanwhile, at Westridge Medical Center, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Caregivers extended their breaks. Administrative processes slowed. Minor acts of defiance rippled throughout departments. A nursing supervisor displayed a miniature patriotic emblem despite dress code restrictions. A physician in training affixed a handwritten note in the personnel lounge stating, "We appreciate your service." The administrator, Richard Marshall, convened an urgent meeting. "This situation doesn't concern veterans specifically," he insisted to expressionless audiences. "It pertains to procedure, liability, regulations that ensure collective safety." A recently graduated nurse spoke up. "Protection from what? Compassion?" Marshall dismissed her remark. Later, he discovered his office drinking vessel had mysteriously vanished. That evening, Marshall sat isolated reviewing Rebecca's employment history, outstanding performance evaluations, patient satisfaction metrics exceeding departmental averages. No previous violations. His telephone rang. The hospital board chairperson was calling. "The narrative continues gaining traction, Richard. Veterans organizations have become involved. A legislative assistant contacted me. She violated protocol," Marshall maintained. "Unquestionably evident." "Occasionally protocols warrant reconsideration," replied the chairperson. "Resolve this before it damages our reputation irreparably." Marshall remained awake throughout the night. At daybreak, he composed a statement defending the suspension while offering to examine policies regarding emergency services for veterans. It satisfied nobody, particularly himself. At 9:30 a.m., his assistant knocked urgently. "There's a military vehicle outside the entrance, and, sir, it displays official flags," Marshall observed through his window. A dark government vehicle with official registration plates waited at the entrance. A uniformed driver stood attentively beside it. "Who occupies the vehicle?" he inquired, his throat unexpectedly parched. "I'm uncertain, but they're requesting Rebecca Morgan, and they specifically mentioned your name." Marshall adjusted his neckwear. Whatever approached, he would confront it professionally. But as the elevator signaled its arrival with that familiar chime, His professional certainty wavered significantly for the first time. The commander positioned himself centrally in the waiting area. "I am Commander Alexander Wright," he announced, "and I served alongside the man your caregiver assisted." A momentary silence. "Thomas Bennett preserved my life in combat operations twice." Murmurs spread among staff members. The administrator swallowed with difficulty. "He sought no attention, merely antibiotics and respect. Your caregiver provided both." Wright turned toward the reception desk. "I understand you rejected him due to lack of insurance coverage." Silence permeated the room. "When I lay bleeding behind military transport, Bennett never requested insurance verification. He simply acted. When our convoy encountered an explosive device with 3 critically injured personnel, Bennett charged through enemy fire to reach them. No protective equipment, no assurance of safety, merely obligation and integrity." Wright's tone remained controlled, yet his gaze revealed intense conviction. Wright presented an officially signed and sealed document. "I've forwarded this to the Department of Veterans Affairs Secretary, and this," he produced a smaller envelope, "is intended for Rebecca Morgan." The administrator attempted to speak. "Commander, this approach is highly unorthodox, as is penalizing compassion." He addressed a young caregiver nearby. "Where is Rebecca currently?" "She's outside, sitting on the curb." Wright proceeded outdoors. Rebecca looked up, bewildered. "Ma'am," he saluted, "Sergeant Bennett requests permission to properly express gratitude." "I'm not military personnel," she answered. "No, but you remembered what we defend." He presented her the envelope. Inside lay an invitation to address the National Medical Ethics Conference and an employment offer as VA Regional Emergency Coordinator. Photographers captured images, journalists appeared, but Rebecca remained silent. She merely gazed back toward the emergency entrance. "Will institutional change occur?" she inquired. "Only if individuals like yourself return to influence it." Time appeared suspended as Commander Wright's statement lingered in the atmosphere. The medical center lobby had grown completely hushed. A gathering of individuals collectively restraining their breath. Every observer witnessed the exchange through windows, entrances, and security footage displayed on screens. Marshall remained immobile, his authority suddenly insubstantial against Wright's commendations and moral clarity. This extended beyond a single caregiver now. This concerned systems that had forgotten their fundamental purpose, about policies that had lost their compassionate core. "Thomas Bennett," Wright continued, his voice carrying through the open entrances, "returned from 3 deployments with more embedded fragments than most historical collections. He never voiced complaints, never sought recognition. When that infection developed, he endured 5 days before requesting assistance because he was conditioned to persevere, to avoid burdening others." Rebecca examined the envelope in her possession. "I don't comprehend. Why expend such effort for my situation?" Wright's expression softened. "Because your experience here repeats everywhere. Honorable individuals penalized for honorable actions. Someone needed to establish boundaries." Inside, Marshall advanced forward, recognizing the moment's significance. "Commander Wright, might we discuss this privately?" "No, sir," Wright responded firmly. "Whatever statement you intend to make should be delivered where everyone can witness it." A tense confrontation ensued. Marshall observed the medical center emblem above the entrance. Westridge Medical Center, uncompromising care. The contradiction wasn't lost on him. "Caregiver Morgan," Marshall finally stated, his voice projecting across the courtyard, "your suspension is withdrawn." A caregiver in the lobby began applauding, then stopped, uncertain whether celebration was appropriate. The silence that followed felt overwhelming. "That response is inadequate," Wright countered. "Retracting an unjust action differs fundamentally from making proper amends." Marshall's complexion reddened. "What would you suggest I do?" "Acknowledge the failure wasn't hers. It resided in a system that forgot its essential mission." Rebecca observed this exchange, still positioned on the curb, envelope in hand. Around her, a modest crowd had assembled: patients, personnel, pedestrians attracted by the unusual presence of a decorated commander at a community medical facility.
An individual emerged from this gathering. Thomas Bennett himself, walking without impediment, his infection resolved. He positioned himself beside Wright, offering no comment, his presence communicating volumes. Marshall looked between them, the commander, the veteran, the caregiver. 23 years of healthcare administration had taught him to safeguard the institution above all considerations. Yet in this moment, he couldn't recall the justification. "Morgan," he stated finally, "I extend my apology to you and Mr. Bennett. I lost perspective regarding true priorities." Rebecca gradually rose, brushing dust from her clothing. "What happened subsequently?" Wright smiled. "That depends on the contents of that envelope." Months later, Westridge Medical Center installed a new plaque near the emergency department. This unit is dedicated to those who prioritize compassion above procedure. Rebecca declined interview requests, but she did resume working in a new capacity, helping educate personnel on treating veterans respectfully. The same administrator who once suspended her was reassigned. Thomas Bennett recovered completely. He visits every Thursday, bringing coffee and a small patriotic emblem for the reception desk. Once, a newly hired caregiver asked, "Is that the woman from the widely shared account?" Bennett replied, "She's not merely an account. She's a living reminder. And whenever a veteran enters Westridge now, they encounter a sign near assessment. You remain remembered. You remain supported. Welcome home." The narrative extended beyond Westridge's boundaries. Additional medical facilities began reviewing their emergency treatment protocols. A state representative proposed legislation ensuring veterans received immediate care regardless of insurance status. They named it the Rebecca Morgan Initiative. 3 months following what staff now referenced as the Commander Wright intervention, Rebecca walked Westridge's corridors with quiet determination. She wore a different identification badge, partly hospital staff, partly VA liaison, a position created specifically for her. The modifications transcended symbolism. Marshall had been transferred to administrative functions at the regional office, removed from patient care decisions. The board had implemented emergency protocols ensuring no veteran would ever be denied treatment regardless of insurance circumstances. 6 additional facilities within the network had adopted comparable policies. Rebecca's office, previously a storage area, now renovated with natural light, had become an unofficial gathering location. Veterans visited with questions, staff sought guidance, even physicians consulted her regarding complex cases involving former military personnel. Commander Wright had fulfilled his promise. The letter had contained not only employment opportunities, but a framework for institutional transformation, which Rebecca now implemented with characteristic quiet resolve. On a rain-soaked Tuesday, precisely 4 months after Thomas Bennett first hobbled into the emergency department, Rebecca discovered a small package on her desk. Inside rested a simple frame containing her previous hospital identification alongside a handwritten message. "Some regulations deserve challenging. Thank you for recognizing which ones." The note lacked a signature, but she recognized Marshall's penmanship. That afternoon, a young physician intercepted her in the corridor. "I have a patient, former Marine Corps, uninsured. Protocol dictates transferring him to the VA facility, but that's 2 hours distant, and his condition continues deteriorating." Rebecca smiled. "What does your professional judgment suggest?" "To provide treatment here immediately." "Then you've already determined the appropriate action." As she continued walking, Rebecca heard the physician call after her. "What if consequences arise?" Rebecca turned, her expression peaceful. "Then I'll contact the commander. Follow Ironheart narratives if you believe acting ethically should never result in penalties, only pride and purpose.